You're watching The New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
PagerDuty is transforming critical work for modern enterprises. With the PagerDuty Operations Cloud, organizations can compress costs, accelerate productivity, and sustain seamless digital experiences. Modern enterprises trust PagerDuty for the management of digital operations, including incident response, AI ops, process automation, and customer service operations.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The New Stack Makers. I'm your host, Heather Joslyn, Editor-in-Chief of The New Stack, and today we're gazing into our crystal ball, looking ahead at what developers will be talking about in the year to come, and leading our look at 2024 and what it holds for developers and their organizations will be Heath Newburn, Global Field CTO of PagerDuty. Hey, Heath.
Hey, howdy, Heather. It's sure good to see you, and thanks for having me on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. Heath, can you tell us a little bit about PagerDuty and what you do there?
Yeah, so I'm PagerDuty's Global Field CTO, so I'm kind of the designated old guy of the organization. So my gig is really helping clients around the world take their existing investments in their development tools, CI/CD tooling, IT service management, observability, APM, all these other things, and saying, how do we really get better business outcomes from them that are going to allow to developers kind of some remove from that break fix work into actual getting things done, getting building done, and really helping drive the strategy of the organization on really looking at how do you get, reduce your overall risk, control costs, but really, finding not only these efficiencies, but how do you drive additional revenue? How do you find new ways to succeed? And so this is kind of our business. We're a classic old school, we started in incident response, have grown capabilities across AI ops, but really become an event-driven automation platform, for developers, for DevOps, SREs, DevSecOps teams to help them succeed better.
Excellent. And we just want to mention that today's conversation is sponsored by PagerDuty. And so let's get going. Let's fire up that crystal ball. But before we get into the predictions, what do you think are some of the most impactful events of 2023 in terms of developers and their work?
Well, clearly, it was Gen AI, AI everything, more Gen AI, some more, a metric ton of security breaches, and some more Gen AI. So I think that if there's anything I heard again and again, I just came back from a Gartner symposium, a couple of them, and it was all sort of Gen AI all the time. So that's what leadership is thinking about. It's what a lot of things are. I think that it's been a challenge this past year, really helping leadership understand that challenge between management by magazine and reality, right? Of where these things can actually give rise to, how they do it. We've seen challenges come up. I was sitting in an organization, and the second line manager was looking kind of down there. I said, so what's up? And he said, we just got an edict from, on high that we have to come back and explain how many people we're going to fire because of Gen AI. And, so these are rough times. We recognize that. So I think that really helping organizations rethink that's been a real challenge this year. A continual increase on the focus of DevSecOps. Things like the MGM hack, a lot of others got very, very public. And I think that, in the past, I used to see a lot of organizations decide up front saying, hey, we're just not going to make that spend on security this year because the potential fallout is going to be less than the cost of it. They're not making those choices anymore. They're coming development teams. How can we be successful? How do we do this? But the good news is we're seeing the rise of tooling like Backstage and a lot of other new things come to light on how we really think about that link between our dev tools and our operations tools. I'm seeing some really cool things starting to happen with data management tooling for development on that they're not having to get very hands on there. So, it's been a lot of downsides this year, but, hopefully some of the upsides that people have seen out of, some of the actual capabilities of Gen AI and things have made it a good year for folks.
So let's turn our attention to 2024. Let's start with the developer experience. That usually refers to how easy or hard it is for developers to do their work. But for our purposes, let's talk about the overall developer experience, where they're working, remotely, in office, hybrid, how much power they have to steer their own fates and their own agendas. in addition to just how hard or easy it is to code and deliver code. What will the overall developer experience look like in 2024 in your view?
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see this major pushback on return to office. I think it's really tough for organizations to raise their hand and say that they had these global and these amazing profits for the past 3-4 years, and then turn around and say, but now you have to come back and completely change the way we work. So I think it's really going to become incumbent on us to understand and really show the value of, hey, where we work and how we work should be up to us. And we do deserve that power. We've earned that right, especially over the fact that we have, the amount of capabilities that we've delivered over the past several years. But I would also really encourage folks, if you don't have a metric for developer experience, if you're not seeing that, whether it's engagement scoring, whether it is through the DORA metrics, however you're defining that, make sure that somebody out there is paying attention to that, and you're able to continually show the value of what you're delivering around that. I'm continuing to see the growth of continuous everything. So we thought about continuous test, continuous integration. This now is just going to continue to grow, and rethinking these pipelines as new ways of doing things. Thinking about not only infrastructure as code, my monitoring definitions as code, my operations as code, right? Where how I continually relook and create these feedback loops in the system that I do. I'm really excited for these organizations that have really started to drive this focus on moving from break fix, always being on the pointy end of the spear. Hey, that, the one or two people I know I can always call Heather to get this particular piece fixed, and really focusing on that, reducing interruptions. Like at PagerDuty, this is something we've seen as, have you got burnout metrics? Just like we've got developer experience metrics, have you actually got empirical data telling you, hey, are we leaning on the right people way too often? Are they getting beat up around things? And also beginning to think about, because controlling your own destiny is really rethinking self-service. Not only in terms of classic service request management or other things, but where are you hitting that wall of centralized capabilities or other things where you're sitting around waiting for things to happen, or you're getting blamed because you don't have the ability to make the decision making. So my prediction is that with the strong economy and high demand, especially in the U.S., there might be an initial slump as companies try to leverage AI as replacements. And they're going to fail. But top talent is always going to rise to the top and get to work where they want, solving the challenges that they're most interested in.
So developers, still have the should be holding the ace in some.
That's exactly right. I think we still have the cards. But I think that the problem is we can't just wave our hands and go, of course, just believe us. Bring data, bring metrics, and make sure that you're showing how you're contributing to those overall.
In May, Slashdata and the CD Foundation, a project of the Linux Foundation, released a study that showed that 84% of developers surveyed said they're involved in DevOps tech activities, but developer productivity hasn't really sped up a lot in the last few years, according to the same study. Platform engineering has emerged as a potential way to improve dev productivity. What do you see coming in next in that arena?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting threads to pull out of that. One is one of the things that came out of some of these presentations and the data that we saw from Gartner recently is that we really have continued to see this. It's a law of diminishing marginal returns around efficiencies, because you can only carve that apple so many times before you're down to the seeds, right? Yeah. And I think boards and others have kind of gotten tired of hearing we're going to be 2% more efficient. Oh, we're going to be 3% more efficient. Oh, God, go buy me these 12 tools and you'll get 4% gains. We're just not going to see that kind of thing. So I think one of the things is rethinking from both an organizational standpoint and also shifting to thinking about how do we create new gains? What are the new outputs? What are the new outcomes, right? As I look at my NOC that's sitting over there, and here's the old grumpy guys that look like me that, are always mad all the time about stuff. And how do we repurpose them to make them more proactive in the things they do? How do we shift their focus and help them make development more effective, more capable in the things that we do? So really, beginning to look at the organizational construct, look at our delivery construct, and rethinking how how do we define long-term success? I had a fantastic discussion with a guy from a life insurance company the other day, and of course, being insurance, we're talking about risk and risk profiles and how do they overall treat risk. And they said, within the IT organization, one of the things that they had finally decided on, especially within R&D, was like, look, it's great to be 3 out of 3, but 7 out of 10 is better. And that really struck me of, what are the things that you're going to do? So being able to quickly identify these areas where you can experiment and fail, where we can take blameless cultures, where we can take the idea of experimenting and trying new things, where we can think about how do we gather information faster. We don't gather information from writing perfect code and kicking out, into the universe. What we do is saying, hey, what does work, what doesn't, how are our end customers actually leveraging it, how are internal business partners better affected by it. So my prediction is that productivity will largely remain flat. That we're going to see, being able to shave off things like platform engineering, things, hey, repurpose your knock into platform engineering. What was that? When would that look like? So maybe within the organization, be able to find those things. But, largely productivity is going to remain flat, but it's going to be those organizations that can demonstrate better risk taking and faster learning through failure. Those are the ones that are going to have the best outcomes. And developers that can design better for better experiments and system design for failure, those are the ones that are going to climb to the top.
So 2024 will be good for organizations that can take risks, but don't expect developer productivity to speed up significantly.
That's exactly right. The shift to gains rather than efficiencies, right? What are the new outcomes you can expect rather than just hey, can I drop another 30 lines of code, this week when I reduce these 2%? Because if you can actually drive a whole new product to market faster, that's a different than an efficiency, right? That's a whole new game.
Let's talk about shifting left and which is there's still a lot of talk about getting developers to shift left and take more responsibility for security earlier in the development process. But there's also some evidence that that might be an uphill battle. There's been some pushback from developers who feel they already have responsibility for enough. There was a study released last spring by Tidelift on open source project maintainers that found that more than half of them, 52%, have no knowledge of some of these major standards that are in the tech press, like SALSA or the OpenSSF security scorecards. So what might be ahead for software supply chain security and shifting left and DevSecOps?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and this is going to be painful to hear, but we're just going to call this group therapy for a second, and we'll hug it out in the end, is you have to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
There, we talk about the cognitive load. We talk about the really the pressure on organizations right now, in particular in development. And this is the perfect place to raise your hand and say, look, this wasn't in my curriculum. I've got these 3 certifications over here. I've done all this work around TOGAF architectures, or I'm your super smart expert in Node.js. Nobody's asking you to this point to have been a security expert. Right. It was a chapter in a book somewhere that we read, or somebody, of course, always says, hey, we should have this. It's a good idea. So what I really look for is how are tools and processes being brought to bear to help these organizations, right? That I want as a developer, a simple plugin, an easy, and where's my easy button around this? So, for example, one of the things is, can you invest in tooling, for example, that allow me to do things like generate a software bill of materials? These SBOMs can actually lead to some phenomenal ways of being able to rapidly identify day zero exploits or help us get a better understanding of how I should drive static code analysis. A lot of different ways that with these things in place, create possibilities for additional tooling, additional processing, without having to go and say, Heather, I really, hope you're up to date on your latest, security certificate standards because, we're moving. That's not terribly helpful to the organizations that exist. So, really looking for things like extending capabilities of quality gates with static code analysis, rethinking these processes and bringing in, the right experts and extending those teams. They're going to be, these are going to be the things that are going to make the big difference. So my prediction is that we will see a rise in more automated tooling to drive DevSecOps enhancements. And those companies that invest in true DevSecOps as part of a process, as part of capabilities, will have a much reduced risk footprint. But the wild thing is, you're not going to know it because they're not going to be the ones out on the, out on the circuit, the speaking circuit, talking about how great they are and stuff, because they don't want those targets on their back. So you're going to have to do a little digging, a little bit of research. But I would definitely pay attention to that. Is that process and tooling? It's going to be that, not individual knowledge.
So I guess the takeaway: automation is going to be the wave of the future. That rather than depending on an individual to pretend they know, they know a lot about security.
Yep,
Okay.
that's exactly right. Embedding those people with the right skills, to help guide, but investing in the tools and processes.
Observability tools generate a flurry of analytics and data about the health of a system. What impact will this have on developers and their teams in the coming year?
Yeah, I think this continues to be an area of untapped potential. We have seen more and more of how of the press around things to better understand it. Being an old guy, I remember that I would have said one time, would have sold my grandmother to have a good understanding of how people are using my software, and yet here we are with all these SaaS platforms with deep operational insights. Yet I'm not necessarily seeing development teams take a true understanding, a true grasp of what are the paths that people are using. Where are you writing code that nobody's actually using? What are the places that would actually lend themselves to optimization? Where are the things that I should really be bringing in my performance engineers in the places that are the most well-worn paths around that? Really rethinking the use of things like traces and understanding end-to-end capabilities of that. Do you know what a rage click is? All right. And have you got capabilities in place to understand at whether, because you may think of it as a front end problem on how those people are interacting. Hey, that's those folks over there. I'm the back end developer. But, look, folks, if it's your calls that are slowing things down, it's your inefficiencies on your lookups that are causing those things to happen, that's going to be, where the weaknesses exist. So being able to leverage your tracing, your better insights out of the metrics, really looking at things like real user monitoring. How are you using things such as synthetic monitoring tied into your test-driven development of making sure that you understand these end-to-end pieces? So my prediction is that we'll see more developer analytics plugins to monitoring tools, to APM tools, to observability tools, and a push from management to getting more operational data-driven development decisions.
So more tooling to help them make sense of this.
More analytics to take that data that exists, breaking that down into usable chunks, and really a push from management saying, hey, rather than let's just drop that next feature, show me how, and I do think this is a place that there are a lot of efficiencies that are left undone inside of the code itself. And so leveraging that observability to help you get there.
And just to you mentioned rage clicks and whether people, that's a term that I've heard recently. Just like my understanding of it is when someone is clicking on a button that's not
right, or clicking
not
around the button or around. Exactly right. And again, we, the front end developers understand that, and a lot of times though they don't realize that the tooling they have in place, actually that's a measurement for them they could have access to.
We started with generative AI. Let's end with it. Clearly, generative AI is going to have a big impact on developers in 2024. In fact, the most recent Stack Overflow developer survey, which came out in June, which I'm sure the next survey will show even more of this, found that 70% of devs plan to use AI in their work or were already doing it. What do you see on a number of fronts? Software development, legal considerations, career impact in terms of Gen AI and developers in the coming year?
Yeah, first I would say breathe. It's software. And we all work in software.
It's not a killer robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It hasn't, every time this comes up, right? Remember, it was going to be, we go through these cycles of it. They were very early on, AI was going to eat our jobs. Remember, computers were going to program themselves. True story. In high school, graduating to age myself, I was graduating in 1987. My very elderly grandmother, pushed $100 bill into my palm as my graduation gift and leaned in close in the most conspiratorial way and said, "Don't go into computers. They're going to program themselves. Go where the real money is." Upholstery. So upholstery was going to save us, and so it has yet to happen, right? And a lot of times, so I'd say start there, right, and understand what that is. But of all the risks you've described, and there are many of them, I think legal is probably the most unexplored at this point. I think there's an army of lawyers out there, but even with some of the more egregious things that we've seen, such as Copilot surfacing up, code that should never have been seen in public and things like these things are all still around. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think, these organizations that kind of focus on how are they going to develop their lighthouse principles for using Gen AI? What will you do? What won't you do? What are the edges of the problem? What are you willing to invest in? What are you not? Really focusing on coaching your new development. Your new developers. Those are the places where we can see hey, this is Stack Overflow on steroids. This is the easy thing to be able to have, and not just static answers, but really developing those answers, but recognizing it does hallucinate. So pay attention around that. Being able to think about how is Gen AI going to remove that cognitive load? I love that you brought that term up, Heather, because I don't think we talk about it enough. That's the place that wears down. That's where the stress comes from. It's this constant banging on. Is what can we offload? What if Gen AI is my junior developer I can hand these tasks off to around that? And I think that there is still some amount of shame and blame around Gen AI, right? We don't want to tell people that's what I'm doing to do stuff with. So coming back to your lighthouse goals, if you've agreed that there is appropriate use for it and we want to use it and we want to pay for it and do the right thing with it, celebrate it. Right. Really make sure you're highlighting those places. So share the wins. Make sure somebody's telling a story, right? And your stand-ups. Hey, who got a great win out of Gen AI yesterday? And I think that is going to remove a lot of kind of that almost I'm afraid to tell anyone that I'm using it kind of concept. Yeah. And really taking that almost in lack of a better word, shame out of it. We got to get rid of that. So my prediction is that we will see at least one major legal challenge and or loss this year that's going to have some fairly significant shockwaves. But in the end, much like we used to do with security, the value of moving fast is going to be more than the potential downside. So this is just going to continue to grow. And the organizations that define those lighthouses, they're going to be the ones that are going to be and stay with those lighthouses are going to be the ones that win in this game.
Yeah, it echoes something I've heard somebody say that Gen AI won't take your job, but somebody who knows how to use Gen AI could take your job.
Perfect. Yeah. It's a fantastic way to put it.
Yeah. So I think that's a wrap on we're going to put away the crystal ball for now. And we want to thank Heath Newburn of PagerDuty for joining us today and sharing his fearless predictions. Thank you, Heath.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. If people have questions, comments, lucid insights, want to ridicule my positions, have unsolicited testimonials on where I was right, find me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to connecting.
Excellent. And we want to also thank PagerDuty for sponsoring today's conversation, and we want to thank all of you for joining us. Be sure to keep tabs on coverage in the coming year to see how many of Keith's forecasts come true. And this has been Heather Joslyn for the New Stack Makers. We'll see you next time.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.